Several explosions and fires flared up in China over the weekend. From the north to the east, the country saw 3 separate accidental blasts. Many were killed and wounded. Australia says it will stand with the U.S. if China attacks Taiwan. The country reiterated it has been with the United States through every major battle in the 21st century. Taiwan and the Czech Republic are strengthening their diplomatic relations in a move angering Beijing. To mark the talks, a Taiwanese minister made an official visit to Prague. International rights group Amnesty International announces plans to close its Hong Kong offices. That's due to concerns over deteriorating freedom in the city. And Beijing appears to push a new pandemic narrative that the virus origin tracks back to American seafood. The latest claim comes after a series of others, with the regime having blamed at least 4 other countries in the past. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A number of accidental explosions and fires detonated in China over the weekend. The first, a tragedy at China's top aerospace university on Sunday. A laboratory blast there killed 2 and injured at least 9 more. The university later confirmed the explosion struck at one of its college campuses, the College of Material Science and Technology, and said it had caused a fire too. The college operates 5 separate labs, but it is unclear which one was involved. And no further victim information has been released. Chinese media reported the incident might have been an experiment gone wrong. Fire officials say the cause of the explosion is still under investigation. The news is triggering concerns over lab safety in China. That's after another accident earlier this year when a graduate student was killed in a chemistry lab blast in Beijing. Elsewhere in the country, another explosion struck China the same day. 2 people were killed and 7 others injured in the northeastern city of Dalian on Sunday. The blast, reportedly caused by a gas leak, started a fire in a residential building in the city. The fire was extinguished and residents were evacuated. The incident came soon after a separate explosion within the week. Less than 300 miles away, the neighboring city of Shenyang saw nearly 50 people injured and 5 killed in a gas explosion at a restaurant. Video footage shared online shows the massive destruction of a 3-story building, with debris littered across the area. Nearby buildings and cars were also damaged. And last month, a gas explosion killed 8 people in Dalian. And in East China, a 2 a.m. fire broke out in Qingdao City over the weekend. The blaze destroyed a number of shops near a local college, all in the middle of the night. The storefronts had been built shoulder to shoulder, allowing the fire to spread easily. One witness described hearing the explosion. Local authorities said no one was killed or injured, though we cannot verify that report independently. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. Australia says it would stand with the U.S. if China were to attack Taiwan. In an interview with Australian media Sky News, Defense Minister Peter Dutton said Australia is obligated to collaborate with the U.S. in the event of a military confrontation between China and Taiwan. He expressed that his country's involvement would be in the interest of Australian national security. Dutton also said his nation has been with the United States through every major battle in the 21st century. When asked whether war will break out between China and Taiwan, Dutton replied that really is a question for the Chinese. He added, China's been very clear about their intent with regard to Taiwan. In the interview, Dutton also admitted that without its alliances, Australia is no match for China militarily. He explained there is no sense in us pretending that if we bought 100 nuclear subs tomorrow, that we can't compete with a superpower like China. It's about a collaboration. It looks like Taiwan has found itself an ally in the Czech Republic. An official Taiwanese delegation arrived in Prague to discuss improving the 2 countries' relations, a move that the Chinese Communist Party has warned against. NTD's Don Ma has more.
Taiwan and the Czech Republic will be strengthening economic relations, Taiwan's Minister of National Development said Monday. His remarks were delivered at a Taiwan-Czech tech and business meeting in Prague.
Taiwan has donated masks and also a production line of masks to the Czech Republic, and the Czechs have returned the favor by donating vaccines. We have started what President Tsai has said is the start of a virtuous cycle. So we are here to expand the virtuous cycle to economic areas.
The Taiwanese minister's attendance at the meeting is part of a larger tour of Central and Eastern Europe. A Taiwanese business delegation will visit Slovakia and Lithuania, in addition to the Czech Republic. The Taiwanese minister's speech was well received. The president of the Czech Senate said that working with Taiwan is in their country's interests.
We are convinced that by developing cooperation with Taiwan, we are, on the one hand, not breaching anything, and we are confirming our sovereignty and independence. Our duty is to behave in a way that ensures we remain independent and support democracies elsewhere in the world.
Mr. Visterchill is a strong supporter of democratic Taiwan. In 2020, he delivered a powerful speech before the Taiwanese parliament, where he said in Mandarin, "I am Taiwanese." It was a reference to the famous anti-communism speech by U.S. President John F. Kennedy in West Berlin, where he said in German, "I am a Berliner."
In the world of freedom, the proudest boast is, "Ich bin ein Berliner."
Taiwan's foreign minister will also be visiting the Czech Republic later in the week. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has warned against the move. A spokesman said that China will take necessary measures to defend its territorial integrity. Beijing claims democratic Taiwan as its own territory, despite the island never being ruled by the Chinese regime. And China has always been angered by Taiwanese officials visiting other countries. Don Ma, NTD News.
The U.S. wants to help Taiwan participate meaningfully in the United Nations. That's according to a Saturday statement after U.S. and Taiwan officials held virtual meetings. It comes days before Chinese Communist leader Xi Jinping made his speech on China's 50th anniversary as a member of the UN. Xi reiterated his idea of a shared future for mankind and implied he was determined to keep Taiwan out of the UN. Taiwan, with its official name the Republic of China, or ROC, was previously a UN member. The ROC held the UN's China seat until 1971, until Communist China took the position. That's years after the Communist forces won the Civil War and drove the ROC to settle on the island. The ROC, a founding member of the UN, eventually lost its position in the organization. As the Taiwan delegation walked out of the UN General Assembly Hall that night, the ROC foreign minister warned that the decision would threaten peace everywhere, saying this is dangerous nonsense. The UN had raised dual representation as a solution, but both Beijing and Taiwan rejected the proposal. As former ROC leader Mr. Chiang Kai-shek famously said, there is no room for patriots and traitors to live together. The UN has thus helped shape China's rising image. As time goes by, more governments shifted their diplomatic relations from Taiwan to Beijing. Even though Beijing has never ruled Taiwan, it claims Taiwan as part of its territory and makes this a principle in its diplomatic relations. Taiwan thus became more diplomatically isolated under Beijing's pressure. However, Taiwan maintains relations with some key partners, including the U.S., which promises to protect Taiwan from communist invasion. The statement irritates Beijing. Chinese state media use strong words against the Biden administration in response to the latest announcement. The regime described the administration as the most incapable and degenerate in the country's history. The communist country claimed that pushing for Taiwan's participation in the UN was a cheap shot and what it called shameless manipulation. Russian and Chinese warships held their first joint patrols in the Western Pacific Ocean over the past week. The news comes from Russia's defense ministry on Saturday, while Japan said it kept a close eye on the movement.
Russian and Chinese warships have held their first joint patrols in the western part of the Pacific Ocean. Russia's defense ministry said in a statement on Saturday that the patrols took place from October 17th to the 23rd. Moscow and Beijing have cultivated closer military and diplomatic ties in recent years at a time when their relations with the West have soured. The pair staged naval cooperation drills in the Sea of Japan earlier in October. The naval maneuvers have been closely watched by Japan, which said earlier this week that a group of 10 vessels from China and Russia sailed through the Tsugaru Strait, separating Japan's main island and its northern island of Hokkaido. The strait is regarded as international waters, And Russia's defense ministry said in a statement that the tasks of the patrols were the demonstration of the Russian and Chinese state flags, maintaining of peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific region, and guardianship of the subjects of maritime economic activities of the two countries.
International rights group Amnesty International said on Monday it would close its Hong Kong offices. That's because a Beijing imposed security law has made it impossible for rights groups to work there freely.
Rights group Amnesty International will shut its offices in Hong Kong by the end of this year. That decision was driven by Hong Kong's national security law. In a statement on Monday, the group said the China-imposed law has, quote, made it effectively impossible for human rights organizations in Hong Kong to work freely and without fear of serious reprisals from the government. In the past, Hong Kong had served as one of Asia's leading NGO hubs, with groups drawn to its robust rule of law and autonomy that was promised for Hong Kong after the control of the former British colony was returned to Beijing in 1997. But since the implementation of the security law last year, authorities have crushed a once vibrant civil society and curbed free speech and protests. At least 35 prominent groups have disbanded, including several leading trade unions, NGOs, and professional groups. While some groups have relocated to Taiwan, others are urgently shredding files and deleting photos and online material, fearing even once innocuous details could be used against them under Hong Kong's evolving security regime. Hong Kong and Chinese authorities say the national security law enshrines individual rights, justifying the laws as necessary to restore stability after mass protest in 2019, when millions took to the streets over many months. There is no immediate response from the Hong Kong government to a Reuters request for comment.
Since the pandemic's discovery in Wuhan early last year, Beijing has made a number of attempts to shift blame for the virus origin away from China and heap it onto other nations. So far, it's accused countries including the U.S., Italy, Spain, India, and Bangladesh. In mid-September, a study by the University of Oxford found that a large number of fake social media accounts were trying to blame U.S. lobster exports for the origin of the pandemic. Marcel Schliebs is a disinformation researcher at the University of Oxford. He's been tracking messages that pro-Beijing social media accounts have spread around Twitter for the past 18 months. And he's found a surprising virus origin theory. The researcher explained he first noticed the misinformation campaign when he saw a tweet from Zha Liyou, the Chinese Consul General in India. The consul had tweeted that a seafood delivery from American state Maine was a major suspect of COVID via cold chain. Diving deeper, Schliebs found hundreds of tweets promoting the same theory in more than 20 languages, and the content of the posts closely mirrored that of the consul's tweet. He also discovered that the earliest news reference of the seafood theory came from a Chinese state-run media outlet. The timing of the tweets also contributed to his suspicions. The majority were posted between 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. China Standard Time, with virtually no tweets being authored during the rest of the day. Taking a closer look at these accounts, Schliebs found that many had been set up recently, and that virtually all their posts related to the so-called COVID seafood cold chain theory. And for another abnormality, in many cases, the gender listed in the accounts didn't match their profile pictures. But the researcher isn't the only one bringing these social media accusations to light. Director of the Annenberg Public Policy Center at the University of Pennsylvania, Kathleen Hall Jameson, echoed the message, saying that the narratives pushed by the pro-Beijing accounts are nothing new. Early on in the pandemic, Chinese sources tried to spread the theory that the Chinese Communist Party virus, which causes COVID-19, originated at American-based Fort Detrick's, and that it was spread to China by the U.S. military, though no evidence was provided to back the allegation. In his Oxford research, Schliebs echoed similar insights, saying almost since the beginning of the outbreak, the question of the origin of COVID has been of core importance to the Chinese propaganda apparatus. Chinese authorities continue to ramp up virus prevention control measures in parts of China. This as the country saw more than 80 new virus cases over the weekend, according to China's National Health Commission. But while the official figures are low, the real case count is likely to be much higher. In a community in China's Gansu province, the whole populace is being transferred away from their homes to undergo compulsory quarantine. In another district, entrances to residential buildings are being sealed and locked up with steel chains. People are seen lining up for virus testing en masse. State authorities say there were 8 new virus cases in Gansu province over the weekend. Meanwhile, in China's Hebei province, locals are buying up groceries in a frenzy. Store shelves are nearly empty. And in the capital, a major hospital has shut down, and all staff are being tested for the virus. Chinese state reports say there were 4 new virus cases in the province over the weekend. A similar situation is happening over in China's northwest Ningxia autonomous region. Grocery store shelves are seen near to empty as locals panic buy. State reports say there were no new virus cases in the region over the weekend. China's Evergrande group said on Sunday it had resumed work on more than 10 projects in 6 cities. The statement came after it had made an $80 million interest payment on dollar bonds last week, avoiding default. The second largest real estate company in China is deep in crisis with more than $300 billion in liabilities. Evergrande said that its efforts to guarantee construction would shore up market confidence. It hasn't disclosed how many of its 1,300 projects across China it had to suspend. In the wake of the supply chain crisis and China's goals to expand its economic influence, Congressman Chip Roy introduced a law last week to encourage overseas manufacturers to move to the U.S. NTD's Melina Weiskup brings us more.
The supply chain issues we're seeing sheds light on how much America imports goods from other nations. For example, we spend over $600 billion on Chinese goods, and during the holidays, this dependence grows even more.
And it comes down to this. If you want a polo shirt, like I'm wearing right now, made in China, you can get an $8 polo. Made in Los Angeles in the garment district is $20. And the U.S. manufacturing and just cannot compete with the cost of the input cost of the Chinese due to the much lower labor costs that we see in the Asian markets.
This is why Congressman Chip Roy and 11 other lawmakers want to ramp up manufacturing in the U.S. Their Beat China bill would give tax advantages to manufacturers that move their companies from overseas to America. Some supply chain experts say these supply chain issues bubbling up might actually be helpful because we might start paying more attention to where our products are coming from and work to increase manufacturing here.
In the past, nobody worried about where things came from. All of a sudden, that's been made visible. If, in fact, we create better capability of employees and companies, etc., then that might be a good thing. We might end up in a better equilibrium, as we say, than we were before, because we would care about where things are produced.
Representative Roy says the supply chain issue is about more than just empty shelves and higher costs. It's a national security issue, because whoever has the economic advantage has greater global influence. And data from 2018 does show China exporting more goods than the U.S. And it's important to note that the Chinese Communist Party does use slave labor in order to produce some of those goods. So really making it cheaper to manufacture here in America is the key to ensuring that America and other nations don't have to depend so much on a market with a record of violating human rights. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
Intelligence officials have launched an effort to warn U.S. firms about the dangers of doing business with China. They hope to protect critical sectors from Chinese dominance. The National Counterintelligence and Security Center is warning about how Chinese companies are linked to military and intelligence apparatuses. The center is educating companies related to artificial intelligence, quantum computing, biotech, semiconductors, and autonomous systems. It says if the Chinese regime gets ahead of the U.S. in these critical areas, it could directly endanger national security. The center mentions how the Chinese regime uses business deals to collect data on U.S. citizens and steal intellectual property. Talks between Apple computers and 2 Chinese battery suppliers have mostly stalled. The batteries would drive the U.S. company's planned electric vehicle. But 3 people with knowledge of the discussion say the Chinese companies refuse to build U.S. plants that would solely cater to the American tech giant.
Talks between Apple and 2 Chinese battery makers over the tech giant's planned electric vehicle have largely stalled. That's according to Reuters sources, who say CATL and BYD were refusing to set up teams and build US plants that would solely cater to the US company. CATL is the world's top maker of batteries for EVs, dominating production of lithium iron phosphate batteries, which are cheaper. The company has been reluctant to build a US factory due to political tensions between Washington and Beijing. Meanwhile, BYD already has a battery plant in Lancaster, California, and declined to build another one solely devoted to Apple. According to the sources, Apple was informed of the firm's reluctance within the last 2 months. The stalled discussions have meant that Apple has been considering Japanese battery makers. Panasonic is said to be one of the companies being considered. However, time is ticking in the electric vehicle race. US President Joe Biden has set a target of having half of all new vehicles sold in 2030 be electric. Sources told Reuters last year Apple was aiming to launch its offering by 2024.
Despite the roadblock, Apple hasn't given up hope of resuming talks with the two Chinese companies. That's according to one source. China now produces as much as 95% of the world's lithium iron phosphate, or LFP batteries, and that tech is becoming a critical part of electric cars. Automaker Tesla is even switching to it for its standard range vehicles. And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching, and see you tomorrow.